When I went to jail, that was certainly, a point where you get to examine your past. But then I started writing a book.
The Wolf of Wall Street is a story rife with corruption. The story is based on real-life Wall Street broker Jordan Belfort, who made millions of dollars by swindling super wealthy investors. Funnily enough, The Wolf of Wall Street is about stolen money and international scandal. But in a strange, layered twist, authorities had learned that the film had itself been backed by stolen money and a huge international scandal. This is the story of how The Wolf of Wall Street got involved in a scam that exceeded a sum of $11 billion. Chapter 1: The 1MDB Scandal. In order to understand how things got this way, it's important to first learn about what this scandal really is, and how it branched out not just to America, but also the rest of the world. The One Malaysia Development Berhad scandal, often referred to as the 1MDB scandal or simply 1MDB, is an ongoing corruption, bribery and money laundering conspiracy in which the Malaysian sovereign wealth fund One Malaysia Development Berhad was systematically misappropriated and embezzled, but with assets diverted globally by the culprits of the scheme. Although it began 2009 in Malaysia, the scandal's global scope implicated institutions and individuals in politics, banking and entertainment, and led to criminal investigations in a number of nations. The 1MDB scandal has often been described as one of the world's greatest financial scandals and was also declared by the United States Department of Justice as the largest kleptocracy case to date in 2016. How did all of this come to light, though? Well, back in 2015, a document leak reported in business magazines like The Edge, Sarawak Report, and The Wall Street Journal showed that Malaysia's Prime Minister at the time, Najib Razak, had channeled over 2.67 billion Malaysian ringgit, about $700 million into his personal bank accounts from 1MDB, which was known to the public as a strategic development company being run by the government. The alleged mastermind of the scheme, Joe Low, was central in the movement of 1MDB funds internationally through shell companies and offshore bank accounts. 3 years later, in 2018, the US Department of Justice found that Low and his other conspirators, including officials from Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, diverted more than $4.5 billion from 1MDB. These funds were used to purchase luxury items and properties, including the superyacht Equanimity, and they were also utilized to finance the American film company Red Granite Pictures. This company was involved in the production of Leonardo DiCaprio's The Wolf of Wall Street and a few other films. 1MDB funds supported lavish lifestyles for Low, Najib and his wife Rosma Mansur, and they also established Najib's stepson Riza Aziz in Hollywood. Attempts were then made for the embezzled funds to be put towards political donations and lobbying in the United States. As expected, this led to a lot of scandals and controversies, but let's break it down now. Chapter 2: The Key Perpetrators. In order to understand how this system came into place, let's take a look at how the key members of the 1MDB scandal came together. First up, we have Najib Razak, who became the Prime Minister of Malaysia in 2009. In his first year in office, he established the One Malaysia Development Berhad, calling it a sovereign wealth fund, which sought out to make strategic investments and alleviate poverty. As per media reports, this was supposed to be a part of his economic liberalization policy and trademark One Malaysia program. The fund had a budget of $1 billion to invest, with Najib having the sole authority to sign off on investments and manage the personnel on its board and management team. He was already married to his wife Rosma Mansur at this time, and her son Riza Aziz was not Najib's child, but rather from a previous relationship. Next up, we have Joe Low, who is a Malaysian businessman and financier from Penang. Despite not having a formal position at 1MDB, Low supported its establishment and was given extensive access to the fund due to his high-profile political connections in Malaysia and the Middle East. It also helped that he had a strong network in the entertainment industry in the United States, which would prove to be useful later on for redirecting the funds. Low was known to have been a part of several high-level meetings regarding 1MDB, and he facilitated numerous deals on the back of his connections. Another key figure in this scandal happened to be Tim Leissner, who is a German banker. What really stands out here is the fact that Leissner was the chairman of American investment bank Goldman Sachs in its Southeast Asia ventures. Leissner was credited with making lucrative deals for Goldman in the region in the aftermath of the financial crisis of 2007 and 2008, which in itself spoke volumes about his abilities and skills. The head of Goldman Sachs in Malaysia, Roger Ng, introduced Leissner to Joe Low, and that's where the scheming essentially began. Leissner and NG were constantly working with Low and using his political connections to establish deals and orchestrate the scheme without having to directly involve their own names. Chapter 3: How did the scheme work? Now that we know of who were key members in this fraud, It's important to understand how they were able to pull it off in the first place. The U.S. Department of Justice had described the scheme as involving three crucial phases. In August 2009, Najib and Lowe had met with representatives of the private oil company PetroSaudi on a yacht in Monaco. The purpose of this meeting was to discuss 1MDB's first investment, which required involvement from high-ranking members, such as Saudi royal Turki bin Abdullah Al Saud and Saudi national Tariq Obaid. During an ensuing visit to Saudi Arabia, Najib signed off on a joint venture worth around $2.5 billion between PetroSaudi and 1MDB. The U.S. Department of Justice later said that this deal was simply used as a pretense to move a sum of $1 billion into a Swiss bank account. An additional amount of over $1.4 billion was then raised by Goldman Sachs in a bond issue and embezzled into a bank account in Switzerland. On top of that, an additional $1.3 billion from Goldman Sachs was also diverted into a bank account in Singapore. US authorities had claimed that Goldman Sachs, particularly Roger Ng, were the central figures when it came to orchestrating the scheme, particularly the laundering of money from the fund, some of which was used to pay bribes to officials in Malaysia and the United Arab Emirates. This was just the beginning though. More than $4 billion was stolen from the 1MDB fund and spent by the criminals on luxury items such as art, diamonds, and property. Lowe allegedly used the 1MDB funds to support a lavish lifestyle in the United States. The DOJ was able to trace at least $100 million from the PetroSaudi deal to the purchase of lavish properties in Hollywood, which would be ridiculous in itself, but on top of that, they were also able to trace another $40 million to elite apartments in New York. Lowe was so good with his network that he managed to establish friendships with high-profile musicians such as Swizz Beatz, Alicia Keys, and Praz. If that wasn't enough, he was pictured partying with uber-popular socialite Paris Hilton. Keeping this in mind, it did not come as a surprise to see that he had used his illegal funds to purchase luxury items for Victoria's Secret model Miranda Kerr and singer Elva Hischau, with whom he was romantically involved for a certain period of time. With such a strong network in show business, the 1MDB scamsters were able to extend their influence to the Hollywood film production company Red Granite Pictures. It was co-founded by Reza Aziz and Joey McFarland in 2010, which meant that it was the recipient of several misappropriated funds. The DOJ suspected and stated that these funds were put towards the production of The Wolf of Wall Street, Martin Scorsese's comedy drama based on the life of Jordan Belfort, whose crimes surprisingly were of a similar nature when compared to the 1MDB situation. Two other notable films that received funding from the scam were Daddy's Home and Dumb and Dumber 2, but the most attention was given to The Wolf of Wall Street due to its global appeal. Once this was out in the open, the DOJ was able to seize royalties from all three films by the time it was 2017. There was no mistake here, as Joe Lowe was personally thanked in the credits of The Wolf of Wall Street, which all but confirmed his role in the production of the film. It is still not officially known if Martin Scorsese himself or the actors such as Leonardo DiCaprio and Margot Robbie had any hand in the illegal nature of the funding, but the investigations are still underway. Chapter 4: Investigations in Malaysia. Of course, the 1MDB scam became a matter of global interest, but the origin of it all was in the country of Malaysia, so let's take a look at how it all began. The earnings from the scheme were not exactly justifiable from a technical perspective, which was fueled the existing suspicions even further. The 425 million ringgits in profit that were declared between 25th September 2009 and 31st March 2010 had raised many criticisms and debates about the lack of transparency in 1MDB's published accounts. Tony Pua, DAP Member of Parliament for Petaling Jaya Utara, questioned Najib, who was 1MDB's advisory board chairman. He basically wanted to know if the figures were the result of an asset injection into 1MDB by the government, such as the transfer of land rights to the company. During the October 2010 parliamentary session, the 1MDB explained that its accounts had been fully audited and signed off by the Big Four accounting firm KPMG and closed as of 31st March 2010. They got another Big Four member, Deloitte, to get involved in the valuation and analysis of the portfolio, while Ernst Young provided tax advice for 1MDB. This meant that they were putting in as much money as they could to validate and safeguard their hidden agendas. And it worked for a while, but then things started to get really suspicious. 1MDB eventually rang alarm bells by asking for a 6-month extension on the filing of its annual report with the Companies Commission of Malaysia, which was due by 30th September 2013. At the same time, the system had changed 3 of its auditors since its inception in 2009. From any standard accounting viewpoint, this was considered suspicious. Responding to the earlier criticisms, the CCM had said that 1MDB had responded and lodged the necessary information, including registering an address, as was required by the law. The Sungai BC Airport land transfer took place in June 2011, which served as a precedent for the development known as Bandar Malaysia. This was a mixed integrated project of commercial, residential, and a high-tech green environment. Prior to this, there had been questions in Parliament by the opposition regarding the lack of progress on the Bandar Malaysia project, even though 1MDB had already raised around 3.5 billion ringgits in loans and Islamic bonds to fund the project and take ownership of the land. In April 2013, 1MDB finally awarded a contract worth 2.1 billion ringgits to Perbadanan Perwira Harta Malaysia, which was a subsidiary of Lembaga Tabung Angkatan and Tanara. The contract was to develop 8 sites for the relocation of Pangkalan Udara Kuala Lumpur, the military base on the Sungai BC land that was to be developed. The construction of Bandar Malaysia was set to commence following the completion of this relocation. As part of its debt rationalization plan, on 31st December 2015, 1MDB inked an agreement with a consortium comprising of Iskandar Waterfront Holdings and China Railway Engineering Corporation to sell 60% of its stake in Bandar Malaysia. However, this deal eventually fell through and the whole thing went to waste. On 7th September 2015, a member of the board of advisors to 1MDB, Abdul Samad alias, resigned abruptly. When questioned about the reason for his resignation, he stated that he did this after many of his requests for information on 1MDB affairs were ignored, which essentially fueled further talks about shady activities being sanctioned behind closed doors. 1MDB subsequently denied receiving repeated requests from Abdul Samad, stating that its president, Arul Kanda, had personally met Abdul Samad in January and March that year to, quote, discuss the company's affairs. Of course, this was nothing more than damage control because the scheme could not afford any detailed investigations into its affairs at the time. 1MDB had not had a proper external accounts audit since 2013. This was partly as a result of Deloitte Malaysia being their auditors at the start of that period. They issued a statement in July 2016 saying that their audit reports of 1MDB financial statements, dated 28 March 2014 and 5 November 2014, covering the financial years 2013 and 2014 respectively, should no longer be relied upon. This was quite a shocking revelation, especially since it was coming from a company as reputed as Deloitte. By early March 2015, with public discontent growing at the perceived lack of financial transparency at 1MDB, the Prime Minister, who was also the chairman of 1MDB's board of advisors, ordered the Auditor General of Malaysia to carry out an audit of the scheme. However, on completion of the audit, the final report was classified as an official secret and only made available to the Public Accounts Committee, or PAC, tasked to investigate any and all improprieties at 1MDB. Alleged copies of the report, however, surfaced on the internet soon after. After Najib's ouster in the 2018 general election, the highly leaked audit report was declassified by the new government on 12 May 2018. After the formation of the new cabinet following Pakatan Harapan's victory in the general elections, Finance Minister Lim Guan Ang decided enough was enough and ordered the appointment of PricewaterhouseCoopers, or PwC, to conduct a special position audit and review of 1MDB. What followed was absolute chaos. Chapter 5: The Big Expose. It was reported that by early 2015, 1MDB has accumulated debts of nearly 42 billion Malaysian ringgits, which was ridiculous to say the least. Further alleged financial challenges caused 1MDB bonds to trade at a record low in the market. Additionally, the Malaysian cabinet rejected a requested cash injection of 3 billion ringgits by 1MDB, narrowing its options to pay off its debts on time. This was expected, considering the amount of negative publicity the scheme had received at the time. No one was willing to take such a chance with a proposed scam. On 3 August 2015, the MICC stated that the 2.6 billion ringgits that had been banked into Najib's personal account had actually come from donors, and not the 1MDB. However, they did not elaborate on who the donors were, why the funds were transferred, or even why this explanation had taken so long to emerge since the allegations were first made on 2 July 2015. The UMNO Kuantan Division Chief Wan Adnan Wan Mamamat later claimed that the 2.6 billion ringgits were from Saudi Arabia as a token of thanks for fighting against the terrorist organization ISIS. He further claimed that the Muslim community in the Philippines, as well as southern Thailand, had also received similar donations, and that since the donations were made to Najib personally, as opposed to UMNO, which explained why the funds were deposited into Najib's personal accounts. Saudi Foreign Minister Adel Al-Jubeir said he was aware of the donation and stated that it was a genuine donation with nothing expected in return from Najib. Attorney General Muhammad Apandi Ali had said that the donation was from one of the sons of the late Saudi King Abdullah, namely Turki bin Abdullah Al Saud. In an interview with IEBC News, Wall Street Journal finance editor Ken Brown stated that all of this was just a sham as the money did not come from the Saudis. To back it up, they had evidence that it came from companies related to 1MDB. Using the premise that this scheme had used inaccurate or incomplete disclosure of information, Bank Negara, in early 2016, revoked permissions previously granted to 1MDB for investments abroad, which had totaled an astonishing $1.83 billion. Bank Negara then called for the Attorney General to begin criminal prosecution of 1MDB after completing its own investigations into the scheme's fund transfers. 1MDB responded that they were unable to repatriate the $1.83 billion demanded by Bank Negara because the funds had already been utilized for their projects, leaving them with no liquidity at all. Things were taking a turn for the worst, and no one was there to bail the criminals out of their mess. Chapter 6: Police Actions and Local Lawsuits. It was but natural for the legal system to intervene even at the local level after so much information came to light. However, there was more than just the concept of justice that took over the country at this time. The scandal took a dramatic twist on 28 August 2015 when a member of Najib Razak's own UMNO party filed a civil suit against him alleging a breach of duties as trustee. He also claimed that Najib defrauded party members by failing to disclose receipt of the donated funds and account for their use. This suit was filed in the Kuala Lumpur High Court and also named Party Executive Secretary Abdul Rauf Yusuf to be implicated in the matter. Expressing fear that Najib Razak would wield influence to remove any member of UMNO for the sole purpose of avoiding liability, the court was also being moved for an injunction to restrain the UMNO, its Supreme Council state liaison body, divisions and branches from removing the nominal plaintiff as a party member, which would be based on the determination of the suit. The plaintiff was also seeking a repayment amounting to $650 million. This was the amount allegedly deposited by Najib to a Singapore bank, an account of all the money that he had received in the form of donations. The account was also believed to have the details of all the money in an AM private banking account, supposedly belonging to Najib, along with damages, costs, and other reliefs. One of the UMNO representatives, Anina Saduddin, who filed the lawsuit, was immediately expelled from the party. This should not have come as a surprise, considering the high stakes involved. Another police report was filed by a Johor UMNO member, Abdul Rash Jamaluddin, against Najib Razak over the funds that went into his bank account and other wrongdoings at 1MDB. One more UMNO member, Khairuddin Abu Hassan, and his lawyer Matthias Chang, had submitted evidence on the 1MDB scandal to the Swiss Attorney General for investigation into whether any Swiss banks had done business with 1MDB. Khairuddin also lodged a police report in Hong Kong against Najib Razak and Jojo Lo relating to 4 companies. They were Alliance Assets International, City Field Enterprises, Bardingale International, and WonderQuest Investment, which had alleged dealings with 1MDB. Khairuddin and Matthias were barred from leaving Malaysia and were then charged under the Security Offences Act, also known as SOSMA, under the pretext of sabotaging Malaysia's banking and financial sector. Things were not looking good for them at all. The opposition People's Justice Party filed a lawsuit against Najib Razak, Tengku Adnan Tengku Mansur, 1MDB, and the Election Commission, accusing them of violating election laws on campaign expenses using funds from 1MDB. However, the Malaysian High Court threw out the suit, stating that PKR had no legal standing to bring the suit against Najib and 1MDB. This was topped up when the former Prime Minister Mahathir filed a lawsuit against Najib Razak for alleged interference in government investigations on 1MDB and the 2.6 billion ringgits in political donation. Chapter 7: What did the government do? Since there were way too many criticisms of the 1MDB issue, Deputy Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin was removed from office and his position was given to the Home Minister at the time, Ahmad Zahid Hamidi. Also removed from office was the Rural and Regional Development Minister Shafi Abdul, even though he was also critical of the 1MDB issue. Both of them were eventually expelled from the UMNO in June 2016. The Attorney General Abdul Ghani Patel, who was heading a multi-agency task force inspecting claims of embezzlements of funds allegedly involving Najib Razak and 1MDB, was dismissed and his position was given to Muhammad Apandi Ali, a former federal court judge. Additionally, The Public Action Committee that was investigating the alleged losses in 1MDB was indefinitely postponed due to 4 of its members being given positions in Najib Razak's cabinet, namely the PAC chairman Nur Jaslan Mohammed, Rizal American non-American Wilfred Matias Tongao, and Mas Ermiati Sam Sudan. Nobody was being spared, because things were getting out of hand and damage control was the need of the hour. The news publications The Edge Malaysia and The Edge Financial Daily were suspended as well, and that too for 3 months in July 2015. This was due to the fact that they were supposedly publishing false reports about 1MDB issues, as per what the Malaysian Home Ministry had claimed. Also in 2015, the website Sarawak Report was blocked by Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission, which regulates internet services in Malaysia. The Malaysian police also issued an arrest warrant for Claire Recastle Brown, who was managing the Sarawak Report, claiming she had participation in activities harmful to parliamentary democracy and disseminating false reports about Prime Minister Najib. The police also arrested UMNO member Karuwuddin Abu Hassan after he lodged police reports in London, Singapore, France, and Hong Kong regarding suspected financial indecencies by 1MDB. According to his lawyer, Karuwuddin was going to the United States to meet with the Federal Bureau of Investigation to urge them to probe 1MDB over money laundering. However, the FBI's New York City office confirmed to the Wall Street Journal that no agent had arranged to meet Karuwuddin or had any previous contact with him. Former First Minister of Kedah, Mukhriz Mahathir, resigned from his office on 3 February 2016, saying he only did so as he had been told by Najib Razak that he was in the wrong by criticizing him and 1MDB publicly. 4 months later, in June, Mukhriz was expelled from the UMNO. His father, Mahathir Mohamad, who had been Malaysia's 4th Prime Minister and who had been a Najib supporter since he assumed office, withdrew his support and quit UMNO later that same month, leading to further tensions. Opposition member of parliament, Rafizi Ramli, was arrested and charged under the Official Secrets Act by the police and the government for leaking information about the Auditor General's report on 1MDB. The Home Ministry stated that they and Interpol had been unsuccessful in locating various individuals linked to 1MDB to help in simplifying their investigations, including business tycoon Joe Low, 1MDB's former senior executives Casey Tang Keng Chi and Jasmine Luai Swan, SRC International Managing Director Nick Faisal Arif Kamil, and Deutsche Bank Country Manager Yusuf Anwar Yaakob. Internet access was blocked by the Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission to websites including Medium.com, which is a social journalism platform. This was over just a single article posted by Sarawak Report. Another website, Asia Sentinel, was blocked after carrying a Sarawak Report article related to MMECC completing a probe that supposedly resulted in 37 charges being drawn up against Najib. The Malaysian Insider was also blocked and its journalists investigated for carrying a report alleging that the MICC had found enough evidence in its investigations into Najib to charge him for corruption. Blocks were removed shortly after the handover of power from Najib's government in the 2018 general election. But it isn't over just yet. The Malaysian Public Accounts Committee inquiry into 1MDB revealed that the management of the fund acted without the board's approval and misled editors several times, calling for the police to investigate its former manager. The PAC also found that the board of directors in which Najib Razak was the chairman failed in giving proper oversight of the fund's finances. The 1MDB board of directors immediately submitted their resignations after the PAC findings were made public. The PAC report stated that an amount of $3.5 billion was paid to a company by the name of ABAR Investments PJS, but IPIC released a statement that neither it or its subsidiary ABAR Investments PJS had any links to a British Virgin Islands incorporated firm ABAR BVI, or that it received any money from that BVI firm. International Petroleum Investment Company PJSC made an announcement in a filing in the London Stock Exchange that 1MDB failed to make a payment of $1.1 billion as part of its debt restructuring agreement, and that the debt deal between the two companies had been terminated. Chapter 8: Connection with America and Hollywood. The Wall Street Journal reported in 2015 that the Federal Bureau of Investigation had begun investigations into money laundering involving 1MDB. The International Corruption Unit of the U.S. Department of Justice began a probe into property purchases in the United States involving Najib Razak's stepson Riza Aziz and the transfer of millions of dollars into Najib Razak's personal account. The probe was looking at properties purchased by shell companies belonging to Riza Aziz and Joho Low, who at the time was only believed to be a close family friend. Investment banks such as JP Morgan Chase Co., Deutsche Bank AG, and Wells Fargo were asked by the DOJ to retain and turn over records that might be related to improper transfers from 1MDB. The FBI issued subpoenas to several past and present employees of film production company Red Granite Pictures, which, as I'd mentioned before, was co-founded by Riza Aziz, also its chairman. This particular action was made in regards to allegations that $155 million were diverted from 1MDB to help finance the 2013 film The Wolf of Wall Street. Also under scrutiny by the FBI and DOJ was the role of global investment bank Goldman Sachs in alleged money laundering and corruption, which was a big deal because of how renowned the bank was. The FBI probed the connection between Najib and top executives of Goldman Sachs and the nature of the latter's involvement in multi-billion-dollar deals with 1MDB. Tim Leissner, the former chairman of Goldman Sachs' Southeast Asia branch and husband of Kimora Lee Leissner, was issued a subpoena by the DOJ as part of their investigations. In the July 2016 DOJ civil lawsuit, a high-ranking government official having control over 1MDB, who was referred to more than 30 times as Malaysian Official 1, was alleged to have received around $681 million of stolen 1MDB money via Falcon Bank in Singapore on 21st and 25th March 2013. Out of this, $650 million were sent back to Falcon Bank on 30th August 2013. In September 2016, Najib Razak was identified as Malaysian Official 1 by Datuk Abdul Rahman Dahlan, then Minister in the Prime Minister's Department. The wife of Malaysian Official 1, Rosma Mansur, was also alleged to have received $30 million in jewels financed from stolen 1MDB funds. In June 2017, the DOJ began actions to recover more than $1 billion from the people close to Najib and 1MDB, seizing assets including high-end properties in Beverly Hills, Los Angeles, Manhattan, New York City, and London, as well as fine artwork, a private jet, a luxury yacht, and royalties from The Wolf of Wall Street and its production company Red Granite Pictures. On 7th March 2018, in California courts, the producers of the film agreed to pay $60 million to settle the DOJ's claims that they financed the movie with money siphoned from 1MDB. The claims were settled in August 2018, with the settlement stipulating that the payment should not be construed as, quote, an admission of wrongdoing or liability on the part of Red Granite. On 1st November 2018, the DOJ announced that two former Goldman Sachs bankers, Tim Leissner and Roger Ng, as well as Joho Low, were charged over funds embezzled from 1MDB and paying bribes to various Malaysian and Abu Dhabi officials. Tim Leissner admitted in a plea that more than $200 million in proceeds from 1MDB bonds flowed into accounts controlled by him and a relative. He agreed to forfeit $43.7 million and pleaded guilty to conspiring to wash money and violate the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, while Roger Ng was arrested in Malaysia at the request of DOJ and extradited to the US for prosecution before returning and facing charges in Malaysia. According to Roger Ng's lawyers, he was infected with dengue fever and leptospirosis while in Malaysian jail and lost a significant amount of weight. On 30th November 2018, the DOJ announced that George Higginbotham, a former DOJ employee, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to deceive us banks about the source and purpose of foreign funds for a lobbying campaign against the U.S. investigations into the 1MDB scandal. The DOJ filed a lawsuit to recover more than $73 million in American bank accounts that Higginbotham helped open on behalf of Joe Low to finance the lobbying campaign. Furthermore, in May 2019, the DOJ announced that it had charged Joe Show Low and former Fugees rapper Pras for conspiring to funnel $21.6 million from overseas accounts into the 2012 presidential election. On 1st November 2019, Barron's reported that Joe Low had forfeited over $100 million in luxury homes as part of a settlement with prosecutors in the United States. Overall, he agreed to give up some $700 million in assets to the U.S. Department of Justice to have charges dropped, without admitting guilt. Elliot Brody was charged by the federal authorities in the violation of Foreign Agents Registration Act as per public court filing published on 8 October 2020. Brody reportedly took $6 million from agents of Malaysia and China to lobby officials from the administration to end the investigation 1MDB scandal. Brody was also charged for lobbying White House officials in alignment to UAE's interest. On 23 February 2022, the star witness in the bribery trial of former Goldman Sachs Group Inc. banker Roger Ng being held in New York testified that ex-Goldman chief Lloyd Blankfein met in 2009 with Najib Razak just ahead of big bond deals for the country's 1MDB fund. This meeting came with an agenda which was that in return for the lucrative business, Goldman was to get Najib's 3 children jobs at the bank. On 24 February, Najib's daughter Noriana Najwa Najib had confirmed that she did try to apply for a job at Goldman Sachs. She said she once met 2 former Goldman Sachs employees, Roger Ng and Tim Leissner, as part of her networking efforts to land a competitive competitive job. Ultimately, an officer within Goldman rejected progressing with any job offer within the group. On 24 February 2022, it was announced that the trial of Roger Ng had been paused because the prosecutors did not share more than 15,000 documents with the defense lawyers representing him. He was convicted of conspiring to launder money and bribe officials in Malaysia and the United Arab Emirates, as well as violating the internal accounting controls of his employer under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. $4.5 billion from the stolen money was laundered through U.S. financial institutions. Chapter 9. Current status. As of May 2019, Malaysia had recovered $322 million worth of 1MDB assets since its renewed investigations into the 1MDB scandal after the 14th general election in May 2018. Steps have been taken to preserve the value of the assets caught up in the case, including the sale of the Park Lane Hotel in New York in November 2018, a step that was endorsed by the U.S. DOJ in accordance with the rule of law and on the basis of no admission of wrongdoing or liability. In August 2018, Malaysian authorities seized a yacht allegedly purchased by Low, selling it around 8 months later to minimize the costs associated with maintaining it. A spokesperson for Low described the seizure as illegal, but I think it's fair to say he shouldn't really be the one commenting on the ethics of expensive assets. Even Leonardo DiCaprio returned the gifts he had received from Low to the U.S. authorities in 2017. These gifts included an Oscar received by Marlon Brando and paintings by Picasso and Jean-Michel Basquiat, the artist who inspired modern musicians such as The Weeknd and Jay-Z. The recovered funds include the sum of $126 million from the Equanimity super yacht, which was judicially sold to the Genting Group. There's also $139 million to be returned by the United States after sale of Joe Low's interest in Park Lane Hotel in Manhattan, and $57 million from a forfeiture settlement of Red Granite Pictures, which has been repatriated to Malaysia after deducting the costs incurred for investigations, seizures, and litigation. Apart from what I've mentioned, another sum of $50 million related to 1MDB has been ordered by the Singapore courts to be repatriated. Malaysia has been working with at least 6 countries to recover about $4.5 billion worth of assets allegedly stolen from 1MDB, in which $1.7 billion worth of assets have been sought by the DOJ to forfeit. On 15 April 2020, it was reported that the DOJ had returned $300 million in funds stolen during the 1MDB scandal to Malaysia. On 24 July 2020, it was announced that the Malaysian government would receive $2.5 billion in cash from Goldman Sachs, and a guarantee from the bank they would also return $1.4 billion in assets linked to 1MDB bonds. Put together, this was substantially less than the $7.5 billion that had been previously demanded by the Malaysian finance minister. At the same time, the Malaysian government agreed to drop all criminal charges against the bank, and that it would cease legal proceedings against 17 current and former Goldman directors. Some commentators argued that Goldman had got away with a very good deal, which in my opinion is a fair statement. In January 2022, the Malaysian government received $111 million as a fine from the local affiliate of KPMG in settlement of the lawsuit filed against it for wrongful auditing. Reports by Offshore Alert indicate that actions to recover further misappropriated assets are ongoing in various jurisdictions. Chapter 10. Conclusion. Now, when it comes to the main perpetrators, it is said that people like Joe Low are hiding in China, but these are simply assumptions with no concrete evidence, so it would be wrong to take them seriously. Either way, the settlement of this massive fraud is ongoing and will continue that way until the several billions of dollars in damages are settled or in the least mitigated. I guess corruption really is prevalent in every industry and department. Like, share, and subscribe if you liked the video, and feel free to suggest any topics you'd like to see in my future videos. See you soon!